Hey, welcome to Dome Theory 96. We're back. Let some people get in the room here, and I'm excited to talk about some first impressions from the NBA season. And one of my big ones was going down to Orlando, Miami as well, catching both Florida teams. And I have some stuff to say about the Heat later in the show when we get into kind of stuff going on around the league through a couple games here. But I'm impressed by this 0-4 Magic team at this point. Even though they're losing games, they're competing. They fought hard with the Celtics, 126-120 on Saturday night there. That was a competitive game, and big reason that they've been able to fight is Paolo Banchero. So we're going to kick it off here with Khobi Price from the Orlando Sentinel. Great to meet you down there, Khobi, and great to talk to you here on the show.
Oh yeah, no, it was great meeting you too, and I appreciate you having me on. That was what was this? The second out of back-to-back for both teams. That was for a second out of a back-to-back early in the season. That was just a very energetic game in a way that you may not expect.
A lot of up and down play. Yeah, you had
Yeah,
some good shooting on both ends. And listen, we finally got to have our first look at Banchero here. I know people have been watching him for years because he's been that prodigy that people hope could come in and physically compete at a high level here. But this wasn't the guy, at least immediately, that seemed like Orlando had their focus on. And maybe there was some like subterfuge there, and they were playing some games, announcing and forecasting Jabari Smith being that guy. But when it all came out on draft night, it looked like they had nobody on their sights but Paolo Banchero, and the way that he's scoring so far and able to get his shot off on a team that's been hit with injuries early on and doesn't have the best roster in the world is really impressive. And it looks like they got the right guy here, at least early on.
yeah, no, Paolo's been looking, as good as advertised. He's not shooting outside of the first game where a lot of his makes are coming in transition, especially as a ball handler and also just filling the lanes. He hasn't shot particularly well. I think I'm looking at it right now. I'm trying to do the quick math. 3 of 16 on threes. He hasn't. I think he's shooting like 40 something percent from the field, but the thing that he's really just shown is just the ability to get to the line, like over and over again. Like 11, he had 11 free throws against the Celtics. He had 11 against the Knicks, 8 in the loss of the Hawks, 7 in his first game against the Pistons. Like he's just getting to the line over and over again. And for a teenager, you don't see that a whole lot. That's for a rookie period, but especially for such a young rookie, that's not something that should be taken for granted. That ability just to create easy points.
Yeah, and I'd imagine that like there's a lot of history going on around him right now. I saw that the first 3 games with 20 plus points there. And did he have 20 again in the fourth one?
Yeah, he had 21 in the fourth one. So I think he was like the third number one pick in NBA's history to have 20 points in 4 consecutive games.
Yeah, and I'm looking at the free throw numbers here. 8.7 through the 23rd per game would be the most since 2000. So there's just historic numbers left and right with this guy. And I think so much of it is the physicality. Obviously, he's built well for the league right off the bat, which is rare. Usually these guys come in skinny, and you've seen in Orlando the amount of guys who have just come in with great length and great height and all that, but have to fill out body-wise has been nonstop over the last maybe decade there. But this guy comes in with serious physicality. But to me, it is that shot making, and we'll see where the three-pointer goes. As you said there, it's not great from that position so far, but he makes tough shots. And so you look at the field goal percentage, 42. That's not great. You're going to want it to get higher than that. But on a team where you just need a guy to create some shots, and you have this offense that's been at the bottom of the league for as long as anyone can remember now, just having a guy that can crack the defense open and make those fadeaways, turnarounds, tough looks in traffic at the rim, transition makes, like he can just get the ball in the net from anywhere. And that's what's most impressive about him to me early on.
Yeah, no, his ability, I mean, just to go get a bucket, just give him the ball up top, the elbow and the post, pinch post, whatever it is, he can get them from, a variety of situations. He's a good driver. He's a good driver. He's learning how to, I guess, protect or better understand how to protect the ball while driving so he doesn't get stripped or doesn't get the ball knocked away. But that's going to be for him, or especially for this specific Magic team, like what they need out of him. They do have other guys who can score, but that ability to score in a variety of ways from all over the floor, and like I said, just be able to force contact, like just put defensive positions like we have nothing else to do except either eventually double team you or foul you or whatever it is. That's going to be such a it's going to be huge for the team because they don't have many other guys who can force that kind of attention or force that kind of issue in that way.
Yeah, and that'll help out everybody else. Now it's tough losing all the guards they have early on. Gary Harris was a guy who probably could have helped this team as a shooter, and Markel Fultz. I'm still so bummed. Like this looks like a great situation for him to be able to play a lot, develop, and get his feet under him, but he just keeps getting hurt. Jonathan Isaac's still not back, which is weird. But and then you have Jalen Suggs getting hurt pretty early on here too. So when I saw like this injury chart last year, and you had all the different teams plotted out in terms of their games missed, and Orlando was like miles to the right in terms of games missed, just beyond anybody else. So not the worst thing in the world, I guess, to potentially have another bad season here, given the draft that's coming up. But you would like to have at least everybody in place to see what you have and make sure that everybody is supported by one another there. Although you got Wendell Carter looking good. But the guy I want to hit on as well here is Bol Bol. But first, what's it been like to just cover Banchero off the floor and talk to him and just him as a personality around this team, since people probably really haven't gotten to hear from him much out of Orlando yet?
Yeah, no, Apollo's he seems very like mature beyond his years. He is 19. I forget when he turns 20. I think he turns 20 in November, something along those lines. Maybe I could be wrong. I'm going to check while we're talking. But he's a teenager. He's a rookie. But you can just tell when talking with him, the answers he gives back, that he just feels like a professional. He's come in November 12th, by the way. That's when he turns 20. He came in just feeling like a professional. He gives all the right answers. So he'll give you insightful answers at the same time. So personality wise, he has the personality that you kind of want from a guy in his position. He's not overwhelmed by the attention. He's not, I guess, doesn't get caught up by it too much. He's pretty steady, at least being around him day to day. And that's kind of what you want, especially when, you do have a team that has as many injuries as they've had. Luckily, when we're talking about Markel or Jalen or Gary, they're not long-term injuries, so you do expect to have them back. But even with that, kind of like the Magic, he's been weathering the storm. And, for a rookie, for a 19-year-old, it's not always like that.
So let's get to the guy who was in Boston for a minute last year. I don't know if people even remember. He appeared at a practice in that boot, sat in some meetings, and then he was out of there. A lot of moving and shuffling for the Celtics.
I just imagine him literally, like literally what you're saying, in a boot, walking in, sign some autographs, and just leaving and get on the first plane to Orlando.
Yeah, that's pretty much what it was. And it's too bad because I remember that was when the Celtics were going bad last year, and you were like, all right, maybe it's time to pile up on some of these other redraft guys, see if you can find some diamonds in the rough. And they kind of did that to some degree with a few guys who came in and out of there and stuck on. But Bol Bol, it wasn't going to happen for. They brought these two, him and PJ Dozier, in on a salary adjusting move, sending out Juancho Hernangomez, I think, trying to remember all these moves off the top of my head. I think he ended up in San Antonio. And then there was a 3-team trade with Denver. These two come into Boston. They're both hurt. And that's when you said, all right, the Celtics are just kind of moving on, preparing for next year. But they did make some moves to allow themselves some flexibility at the deadline. And that ended up being, I guess, some salary dumping in terms of Bol Bol and Dozier going down to Orlando. So he missed all last year, recovers from that foot injury he had suffered. And I remember watching him at Summer League with Denver right before he got hurt, and he looked great. There was a lot of like full court runs where he was dynamic, and you get that flash of shooting from time to time with him, and then shot blocking, like by far the biggest thing with him. I actually screwed these numbers up here, so I'll take this down. But 2.8 blocks per game. You're getting some quick bursts of offense out of him. And the biggest memory I had of him in that Boston game is just coming in and blocking Brogdon like 2 or 3 straight times on jump shots. So he's dynamic right now. He's not playing a ton, but he's making the most of these minutes. And this is the kind of thing you want if you're Orlando, is just taking a flyer on a guy like this, a guy who's relatively young, still, and just has these insane physical tools, and he's coming in and making an impact off the bench.
Yeah, he's giving Orlando kind of what you ideally want. Like, he's playing 16 minutes a night, which doesn't sound like a lot, but for him it is. I wrote it yesterday in my story yesterday. Like, this was the loss against the Knicks was the first time that Bol Bol had played at least 10 minutes in 4 consecutive games, which it's a weird, like, it's one of those, like, wait, what? You kind of have to, like, listen to it again. Like, when I noticed that myself, I was like, let me go back all the way through this because that doesn't make sense. But it's true. He hasn't gotten a whole lot of playing time. And not just that, but he hasn't gotten a whole lot of consistent playing time. So this is really our true first look of Bol Bol, the NBA player, in an actual role that's going to be, it looks like it could be consistent. You mentioned the injuries. Jonathan Isaac is out. Mo Wagner is out. Those are two bigs essentially who would be competing for rotation minutes. And who knows what's going to happen, once those guys return. But at least as of right, in terms of the roles and what's going to happen, at least right now, Bol's making the most of the opportunity. The shot blocking has been insane. He's blocking shots inside the paint just as well as he's blocking shots or outside the 3-point line. The time and anticipation and being light on his feet, you don't really see that with a lot of guys. 6'11" up, and he's 7'2" with the 7'7" wingspan. Like, even when you feel like and it seems like that's what happened with Brogdon. You think, oh, he's too far away. He's outside the play. I'm gonna get my shot off. He just puts his arms up like all the way to the ceiling, and next thing you know, he's igniting a fast break because he's blocking you, and you're like, oh shoot, I just took a three, and there's nobody else behind me. Like, I'm taking an above the break three, and nobody's else behind me, and it's off to the races. And they're just game-changing, possession-changing plays that he makes.
Yeah, and the more transition you can get out of plays like that is going to help them offensively. This offense has just been like in the tank for years. So the more you can create in transition, the easier it's going to be for everybody. And the transition game's been great around the league so far. You're seeing teams put up like 120 per 100 in some cases through some of these early games. So that rule change is helping pretty much every offense out around the league for the most part. So they were getting that against Boston for sure, and Boston's going to have to figure out a way to shore that up. We'll get to them in a second. But in terms of Bol here, you look at these per 36, and these aren't always like the most accurate numbers, but they actually went up after last game. I've been keeping an eye on them with him because, like you said, he's not playing a ton. So what could you get out of playing him a little bit more? 22.5 points, 10.7 rebounds, and 6.2 blocks. That's per 36. So, like, there's a case here for Mosley to play this guy a little bit more now, especially with what you said, Mo Wagner and some of these other guys being out. See what you got early and often.
Yeah, I'm curious to see. I'm curious to see. With some of these guys out, the rotation's been hit pretty hard because they're missing 5 guys who fight for rotation minutes. So I'm curious to see just after I think he played 20 against the Knicks on Monday. Does his miss go even more? It's been kind of steady, just a rise, and I think some of that is this guy hasn't really played a whole lot of basketball in a while. We're kind of easing him into just being on the floor again, but he's trying to carve out a role. Big plays, that the blocks, that leads to transition, but he's also making the subtle plays. Being in the dunker spot, running the baseline well. But in transition, you mentioned that summer league with Denver, just being able to bring the ball up the floor. His driving game, even in the half court, just kind of like, wait a second, like you have great body control for your size, and nobody can really bother your shot if it's so high. So there are things we can do with you, but once he gets into his flow, it's just a really difficult task for most defenders because he's nimble, but he's tall. There's a lot going on with him.
Yeah, you don't even know what he like. There was a drive on opening night against Detroit where he just went from like the left wing, spun around, and like finished reverse underneath. You don't even know what to call a play like that. Like, there are things he can do that not many guys around the league are capable of. It's not like Victor Wembanyama, but at that size, there's a little bit of that fluidity to him, which was always the most intriguing thing about him. Like in college, he could just go wherever he wanted. So he was going to post up a lot, and he was going to do a lot of just post finishes over guys. And then he shot the three from time to time there at Oregon. But now able to face up, able to do some things with the ball in his hands. Like, you're seeing him make the steps. And you were looking for Banchero's age. I actually want to look up Bol Bol's at this point. He's 22, 23 in November. So a little older now. It's taken him a little while, but he's still young enough where he can project some serious upside there. 7'8" wingspan, 7'2". That surprised me down in Orlando, seeing him stand next to Luke Cornett and just seeing that comparison for how tall he is.
No, he's something else, and you just feel, you can see it. I mean, you can see it because I think the Knicks, they gave the Magic the best fight of all the teams that they played so far, or probably they played the best game against the Magic, and you can kind of see that Bol, he more than held his own, and he has this, he's 7'2", but he almost plays like a wing, like a bigger wing. It's not this like, oh, he's a big man to play him like a big. Like, he, at least in some lineups, he's played as the 3 in certain lineups because he does have that fluidity. He does have that ball handling skill, and he's just able to navigate in really tight spaces in ways that big men, quote unquote, don't. So I'm really interested to see how he takes, where he goes from here, after the first 4 games, after they're going to play Cleveland tonight for their 5th game.
So what else you got on the Magic, if you wanted to shout out something for people to look for with this team, other than what we've discussed so far here?
Yeah, no, I think there's a lot of just we talked about with Paolo and his just his scoring ability. Like, this team's getting to the line a lot more than they did last year. And honestly, since the Whites left, they haven't really been a free throw a team that's gone to the line. And a lot of that is because of Paolo. So that's one thing to keep an eye on. I tweeted this out a couple days ago, but with the amount of just free throw he's taking, like it's approached historic territory. He's getting to the line 9.3 times a game. I think David Robinson is the only player, as a rookie, that is, to get to the free throw line more as a rookie. I think it was like 10.2. Everybody else is below Paolo, at least at this moment. Obviously, we're 4 games in. There's a lot more of the season, but that's something to keep an eye on. It's a lot more. We didn't even mention Franz Wagner.
Good one.
He's being put in a lot more ball handling situations, and it's been up and down for him in that sense. Been more turnovers. Sometimes it can take him a minute to get himself and even the offense set up. But I think overall this will be a good experience for him because he's going to learn more about running an offense than he's accustomed to. We asked him about this. I think that was last week or maybe before they played the Hawks. Just how to go after playing Detroit in the season opener, and he said he could have handled it better, but just being that kind of ball handler isn't something that he's accustomed to on that consistent of a basis. We saw a little bit of it last year, but it's been taken to a different level this year.
Yeah, and that's good for his game because you do wonder if there's more of a roundedness and like a front man role possible there because he did have moments last year, right? He scored 40 points in a game, if I remember correctly.
38 against Milwaukee. I think it was in December.
Yeah, so you do wonder with him whether like there's really that kind of potential in there. He had a couple 20-point games mixed in. It certainly did some things with the ball in his hands, but shooting was really that forte with him last year. And like, to me, I look at him and I'd say he's like a connector, like more that glue guy, third man on our team. I don't know who would ultimately be the number 2 in Orlando. Maybe it's whoever you get this year in the draft. But to me, it'd be like Paolo and 1, Franz connecting, doing all those little things, secondary ball handling, and then number 2 guy, maybe Victor, coming in there and giving them that like top tier scoring, more efficient. Because looking at these numbers now, if he is getting more ball time there, the assists are up, which is good. Turnovers bumped up by almost 1 per game. And then the shooting hasn't been great early on, like 23% from 3, 41% from the field. So I don't want to put a cap on a guy's ceiling at, what is he, 21? You want to see what he's capable of in that role. But to me, like, I feel like his best bet is sort of that connecting role.
Yeah, I was going to say, and this is something I'm keeping an eye on. Again, it's 4 games. A lot of the things I'm going to say is more so keeping an eye on rather than this is a definitive thing. But going on cleaning the glass, last year, Franz was assisted on 59% of his makes.
Yep.
this year through 4 games heading to tonight's game is 28%.
Wow, that's
So
dramatic.
So yeah, that's a significant. We're talking about a 30% difference, and a lot of that is, yes, Jalen's been hurt, Markel's hasn't played, and they're also just they've changed up the offense a little bit. Like Cole Anthony's not, at least in the first game, he wasn't handling the ball as much. It's been a different, like the ecosystem has changed a little bit, where Paolo and Franz are taking on more responsibility, but that's just something to keep an eye on. Just saying, like, before he was that off-ball cutter, spot-up guy who could do a little bit, like, who was the ball handler in certain lineups. Now it's almost flipping, where he's one of the main, like, he is the main guy, or even the second guy ball handling. So seeing, before it was guys creating for him, now he's trying to create for others, and just seeing, like, how can you find that better medium between the two, where he can benefit more off of the plays other guys make, because the cutting is still remains one of his best skills, and he is a good spot up shooter.
Cole, what were they? I'm trying to remember exactly. What were they down? 3, maybe 4. I'm forgetting if it was 1 possession, 2 possession, where he tried to throw down in traffic. That was one of the funnier moments from that game between Boston and Orlando, when he tried to throw down a big dunk, I think, to either tie the game or pull within a possession.
I think it was either 5 or 4, because I think if he dunked that, it would have been like a 3 or 2 point game. I want to say it was 5. I could be wrong though.
I don't think it was 1 possession, because that would have been even more dramatic if he did that in that circumstance.
Yeah, I think it was 5 or 4. That's that. Yeah, because if it would have been 2 or 3. But
Yep,
yeah,
it
that
was 5. It was 5 with 2
5.
minutes to go.
Okay, that makes complete sense then. Yeah, no, it's weird, because outside of that, at least, well, he didn't have the best game against the Knicks, but he was having a good game up until that point. At least if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah, it went down to the wire. They fought well. You said back to back. I guess the one thing I got left on the Magic is, when will we see Isaac?
TBD. It's the last, and it's something I'm going to ask about once they get back to Orlando later this week. I don't believe that. I know he didn't travel. Him and the rest of the injured guys, I don't believe they traveled for last road trip, and I don't think they traveled for this road trip either. But last we saw him, at least last time I saw him, he's been doing a bunch of, like, more quote unquote basketball things, like closing out drives. Like, he's on the court doing a lot of individual work. Last I checked, he wasn't doing 5-on-5, but that was a while ago. The last time I checked. So once the team returns to Orlando, I imagine there'll be some sort of update on what he's doing. Because what he's doing is going to be more. The Magic aren't going to give like a timetable, but you can get a better understanding or clarity of what's going on once you understand, like, all right, what exactly is he doing in practices or on the floor?
Yeah, he hasn't played since August 2nd, 2020.
Hasn't played since the bubble.
It's a long time he's been out. It's kind of crazy. Multiple injuries too, right? That have kept him out.
Yeah, he had at first it was the ACL, torn ACL, that kept him out for, what would that have been, the 2020-2021 season, and then rehabbing, trying to get back last season. They realized that they were just running out of time to bring him back, and then after that he had the hamstring injury while rehabbing.
We'll see. A lot of guys have come in and moved in front of him in terms of the hierarchy here, and who they're developing and who they're investing in. You wonder, like, what his career outlook looks like at this point, missing that much time. So I'm interested to see that. That's my last big question with the Magic here. I'll flip over to some of your impressions of the Celtics early on, as we get to see them through 4 games right now. But first, we are brought to you here by the Calm app. Head over there and get 40% off when you download it. Show some love to the Garden Report by going to calm.com/garden. It's sleep sounds, it's meditation, it's yoga, it's a little bit of everything to help you calm your mind, regardless of the time of day. Meditation in the morning, they get some routines to go through midday, maybe at your lunch or something, getting a break. And of course, at night, those sleep sounds are a big help for me. So go over there, check that out. There's a lot more bedtime stories, yoga, I think they have as well. So go over there and get 40% off that whole library. And then, of course, Athletic Greens, had it this morning, enjoying some water now, but they're going to give you a year's supply of vitamin D, immune boosting, as it gets chilly up here. You don't know about that, Khobi. It's rainy.
I'm a Midwest dude, and I actually used to live up there, so I know about the cold, man. Don't try to do. I used to live.
You might have
Live up in
forgot though. You might have forgot.
Nah, that's fair. That's fair.
We'll get into that in a second, but athleticgreens.com/garden, your supply of vitamin D, 5 free travel packs. It's vitamins, minerals, adaptogens, probiotics, and more. A little bit of everything for your health. Give you an energy boost, and it tastes great. So go over there, check that out. You'll get cool gear like this as well when you sign up. That's athleticgreens.com/garden. So what was your journey to the Orlando beat, Khobi? Take me through the step-by-steps there.
Yeah, so I guess I said it. I grew up in Chicago and the Chicagoland area. Moved to South Florida in September 2019. At first, I was covering Florida Atlantic University football. I was the backup Miami Heat writer. I covered Inter Miami CF of Major League Soccer, and then I covered the Miami Hurricanes football team. And it would have been December 1st, 2021. So 11 months ago is when I moved up to Orlando rather, to cover the Magic.
All right, so this is your second full season on the beat there?
This would be my first full season.
Season.
I think I covered exactly 60 games last year. I came in on whatever game 22 or game 23 last year. So this would be the full. I'll be able to experience the full training camp, preseason, regular season, all that jazz.
Yeah, and that's great because, I think people need to keep tabs on a team like Orlando and see what's going on there. Not on national TV a ton, not a lot of buzz, but a lot of important young players there like we've kicked around. You can, of course, read Khobi at the Orlando Sentinel and follow him on Twitter at Khobi, KHOBI_Price. Let's talk Celtics, though, team that is on national TV a ton. They'll have Cleveland on Friday, Washington on Sunday. They're 3-1. Look kind of bulletproof through those first 3 games, but you had some bad defensive numbers, including that blow-up 120 that Orlando poured on them there. Terrence Ross was kind of cooking them around some screens and pull-ups mid-range. Heat tried to do the same thing the night before, but didn't have a ton of luck. Bam got into some foul trouble when they capsized in the second half. So you did see a couple, pokes in the armor there where teams could make them vulnerable. That drop defense to me hasn't been great. You're not getting a ton out of Horford in that. You're missing Rob. But this team that was number 1 in defense by miles last year is down to 24th, giving up transition runs against the Bulls, just a debacle of a game there on Monday. So now you do start to put up the panic meter a little bit there. They're not rebounding great. They're not piling up stops. Even Marcus Smart's defensive analytics are looking pretty rough early on after his Defensive Player of the Year season. But offensively, they're rolling. 126 here. They're number 3. They're hitting shots. They're looking dynamic on and off the ball. So you've gained in an area where you were weak last year, and it looks like they've dropped off in an area where they were strong a year ago.
Yeah, I've only really – so for the Celtics, I was able to watch the opening game that they played against the Sixers. And obviously – yeah, and then obviously I was able to watch the game against the Magic in the entirety. And what really stood out to me more so in that in the game against Boston, in the game against Orlando, was just how it seemed like they weren't defending at the level that I would expect them to. Now, granted, I had to remember that they Al set that game. They're missing Rob. It is early in the season. But they're just the level of, I guess, detail didn't seem there. And I understand that, yes, they're missing their starting bigs, essentially. So that's going to have an impact on, the style of defense you play, but also just the impact those defenders have. But even with that, they still look good to me. And that starts with Jason Tatum. When watching the game, I tweeted out does Tatum add a floater during the offseason? What's going on? I don't remember him being able to score, in that intermediate range, before the season. And then I think Keith got back to me. He said, yeah, that's something he really worked on. I was like, all right, well, that really changes the game for him because if he's able to have that floater, then that's just going to open up. Now you really have to just the gaps are just hard to close because he's showing a willingness to take that shot. And that was one of it's a small detail, but a big detail to me in terms of is him and what his game's going to be like. And obviously, he's been shooting the ball ridiculously to start the season. But that floater is just going to open up so much for him.
Yeah, I've seen that ton of at the end of practice, particularly when we're in there. He'll be tossing those up. It hasn't looked great all the time, but he did get a few off. One in the Orlando game and one against Philadelphia, I think, as well, getting downhill. Everything's at the basket for him, which is great. He's not settling as much as he has in the past, particularly on those leaners. So you're seeing him score from more efficient spots. You're seeing him do little things like get off the ball, screen away from the ball. There was one play down the stretch in that Orlando game where he freed Derek White up, and again, a close game in the fourth quarter for a 3-point play going to his left, setting a screen for him, which he did last year, but came along late. That wasn't a thing for him earlier in his career. It was sort of making himself a target in the pick and roll or freeing guys up with screening actions on and off the ball, which I think only helps himself and others, as you saw there. And then finding him for that big slam, Derek White, that is, in the final minutes of that game. So big growth as a playmaker. He's not turning the ball over, which is awesome. Below 2 per game early on. Efficient. He's a 45% guy, shooting 55%, and finally finding his 3-point stroke in that last game early on. So he looks like a guy getting to the free throw line more. Defensively, you saw him take on that Paolo assignment a few times, force the ball off him out of bounds. Like, he just does everything to a level where you say, beyond the attention that's on him and how good this team could potentially be here, there's real MVP chance with him here. And he talked about it a little bit after that Orlando game. You're 3 games in, so it's way too early to start forecasting that. But in terms of like who the names could be that emerge here, he's right there with John Morant, I think, that could be next in line for potentially having their first MVP this season.
Yeah, I don't see why not. Like you said, obviously it's super early in the season. There's a lot of ball to be played, but the way it's more so the approach. More so the approach. And yeah, some of the shooting efficiency will drop, but the approach, the mindset, and just the, I guess, understanding of what he needs to do. Like, he's picking his spots in just a more efficient manner. And like watching that game, like I said, watching the Philly game, but even watching like when they played Orlando, I was taken aback by him because he seems like he's taking that step from like star wing player to I can control the game and I can control the game how I want. So like in my image, like this game will be shaped in my image. And that's a huge step for any player, but especially for a wing, because those are the kind of players that you build championship teams around.
Yeah, and that defense too. Like I'm writing about him after that game, and I'm going through and hitting on all these different things, and it takes you a while to even get to his defense. Like it's amazing the player he's become on that end of the floor. There's all defensive capability with him. Again, like stopping Paolo at the spots that he did were important in that game. Having to take an assignment on a bigger, like more physical guy, even though he's younger, was impressive and showed his versatility there. And he had huge blocks, not only in that Philly game during one of their runs that shut them off, but in Miami, he had a chase down block as well while Miami had gone ahead. And there's just been these moments where he's been able to shut the game off with either a play, a basket, a stop defensively. So you talk about like that overall control of the game. That's going to be his advantage on some of these guards. You know, Giannis is always going to be able to do that too. So that might be a tough guy to get past in that MVP conversation. Jokic has such an overarching control of the game, but that's what it takes to put yourself in that conversation. Like, he is skyrocketed. I don't know where you put him in the league right now, but I think everybody generally has him top 10. To get into like that conversation of a guy that can like have his team in the championship conversation every year, those are the things you need to be able to do consistently. And it came and went last year. It was his first year of really trying to do all those things. But you saw the hints of it. And now, like night in and night out, you're starting to see all those different things: defense, passing, screening, rebounding. It's all there with him.
Yeah, while you were talking, I was actually trying to think of like just names who I would put in the top 10, and he's easily in there. But there is like maybe like on the outs, like on the outskirts, maybe somewhere in that like 10 to 7 range, 10 to 8. But I mean, to get into that 5, well, that's I guess 2 to 6 range, like it just takes that a little bit more consistency. And just being able to see it more. night in and night out. I still, I guess the playmaking has stepped up. So he's not going to be the playmaker that like a Luka is, or even a Jokic or a Giannis is, but he showed growth in that area a lot to me last year. So I'm really curious to see, he's showing the shot making has been there, the shot creation has been there. Sometimes it's just about like I said, picking your spots a little bit better and knowing like I can just get this off anytime confidently. So I'm just, for me watching him, I'm curious about to see like, just is this going to be a hot start, and he's going to get back to where he was kind of towards the end of last season, or is this just going to be who he is night in and night out? Like, I'm controlling this game no matter who else is on the floor, night in and night out.
They need that consistency from him, especially while other guys are out. You're going to need those rest nights for Al. That was so important, stealing that game from Orlando on a rest night for him, back-to-back as well. They faltered against Chicago, which, that's the third game in 4 nights. So maybe that's just kind of a one you just throw in the wash. But it was concerning that they got off to this great start, 8 minutes. They're flowing offensively, doing some of those things we've talked about here, and then it just kind of slipped away from them. They took their foot off the gas, Marcus Smart said after. I guess the most interesting guy, and like when we talk about that top 10 list, this season's going to be interesting for me from like a young guys versus old guys perspective, because that list, besides Jokic and Giannis, is dominated by a lot of that old guard, Kevin Durant, Steph Curry, LeBron, those type of guys in there. Even like a Paul George and a Kawhi are really in swing spots in that top 10 to 15 spot. And then you have your Ja, who I think by the end of this season is like firmly in that top like 8, top 5 maybe, the way he's been going. Tatum is definitely a guy you start to think about in there as well. Like, he's going to start to rise and move past some people. And, in terms of people who fall, like, what are you doing with LeBron at this point? Like, he's going to keep putting up those numbers, but is the impact still there? Is the winning certainly not going to be there as they start 0-4? So I wonder how much you drop a guy like that, even if he's still putting his numbers there. Like, I saw someone ask on Twitter coming into the season, would you rather have Tatum or LeBron right now? And you probably choose LeBron like each of the last 2-3 years. And then I think this might be the year where that flips. If you had to choose between one of them, like right now, you're starting a team with one of those two guys trying to go for a championship or championships one after another into the future, I'm probably taking Tatum.
I'm thinking about this entire time. I mean, I guess if I'm looking solely on this season,
you're still going LeBron?
I mean, part of me just want. I feel like I want to. I mean, that Lakers situation is so bad that I feel like is messing up my perception of what LeBron is and isn't.
Maybe mine too. Yeah.
Yeah, and it is not excusing. It's not saying that he hasn't contributed to that situation, both on and off the floor. He plays a part in it, especially off the floor. He's responsible in terms of like who the Lakers have and who they don't have and the moves they made to an extent. And even on the floor in terms of decision making. But I just think like, is LeBron, like, what does LeBron look like if the actual on-court situation is different? Like, do we see him more engaged or just not, taking logo threes like in the first quarter just because he can and nobody else on the team's going to shoot? Like, what if he was in a healthier ecosystem?
The FU threes, I love those.
Yeah, just the if he was in a healthier ecosystem, what would it be? So, like, player for player, when it really matters, I mean, part of me just wants to say I have a hard time not saying LeBron, but I mean, the fact that it's a legit question that's giving me brain farts is it's a testament to what Tatum's done, because
he really is hard to gauge in that situation. Like 27, 11, and 7 is pretty monstrous for a 38-year-old, but 47th in the field that's probably the lowest ever, at least lowest since 07 for him to start off here. And then 25% from 3. They are a dreadful shooting team. And that's going to impact him as well. That roster's so poorly built. And they're one of those things, I guess, is a good time to get into stuff going on around the league right now. I can't take my eyes off of them. And hopefully that changes because I don't want to watch them anymore. but it's just like such a disaster. Someone was saying on a podcast recently, like them in Brooklyn, or it might have been on Inside the NBA actually. They were saying like you can't take your eyes off of it because it's like a crash or something. Like you're going by it and you just gotta like look at it, even though it's pretty ugly. So them, Brooklyn, I think we all had an idea that it wasn't going to go well for those two, and it certainly hasn't so far. But in terms of things around the league that are looking up, I got to look at Portland. They've been exciting to watch to me so far. Things are looking nice there with Lillard back. There's a lot of guys around the league injury-wise who are back on the floor that I'm excited about, and they're probably at the top of that list. Like you see how Anthony Simons and him are starting to mesh together, and you have some younger wings like Shaden Sharp coming in, and they've been one of my more exciting teams to watch. I'd probably throw the Jazz in there surprisingly as well. They're doing some good things early, despite just being this group that's thrown together right now. And a team that's really surprised me is Atlanta. I didn't have high hopes for them. That guard tandem looks dynamic. You got some finishers going off around them. They've always had a great offense, but the defense looking stable so far. So they might end up being better than I thought, and they might be a team that replaces like a Miami in my mind. Because Miami 1-3, something's up there. Something is up in Miami, and I saw it on Friday night. Like the vibes are just weird there, and that's a team you've covered as well. Normally, it's like everyone's moving on a string. The defense is great. You got Spoelstra coaching up some of these unsung guys, but early on, like Butler's out of it. Lowry looks terrible. Bam's yelling at officials, fouling out of games, and they're losing.
Yeah, it's been. I was thinking about before we hopped on. I was thinking about like the preseason chatter was, oh man, like the East is going to be so tough. It's going to be so deep. Like it's going to be, all these teams. Like it's going to be a battle for the top 8 spots, and that still could very well be true. But it's funny that the teams that we thought in theory were going to be like toward the top, Philly, Miami, Brooklyn. I guess people, if you held out hope for Brooklyn, like those teams are all just having these really weird starts. Like Philly just won their first game the other night. Like Milwaukee and Boston have lived up to the billing. You didn't even mention Washington. I know it's hard to mention every single team, but they Washington and Charlotte to me have been the teams that I've been like, wait a second, because I saw Atlanta play when that would have been the night before the Magic played Boston. And I was like, oh yeah, no, this team they're clicking. I think they're going to be fine. And I thought they were going to be fine before the season, but they're just so like the East is going to be so tough. I didn't know where they would fall. But Charlotte and Washington getting off to as good of a start as they have. Granted, Charlotte did play, I believe, the Spurs in their season opener, so you have to take that for what it is. But like Steve Clifford is going to find a way to help a team win no matter what. And we saw this Washington team get off to a good start last season. I think they were 8-3 to open.
Yeah, they were the best team in the league through like 10.
So just seeing what's sustainable, how they'll keep it up. I mean, that's why this early season's so tough because, like I said, we're watching it was 8-3 last year, but Beal's look solid, but it's not just Beal, doing everything. Like Kuzma's look good. Porzingis has been fine. It's a very, I guess, balanced team in that sense, or at least so far, in a way that previous years or previous iterations of this team, it hasn't really been so balanced. Like 2 years ago, it was Bradley Beal dropping 30 and they're losing by however much. So I'm just curious to see where they go from here.
It's all about Porzingis' health, right? And there always seems to be a injury lurking around the corner for him, unfortunately, at this point in his career. But when he's out there, even for Dallas, he was giving them 20 and rebounding, and the defense isn't what it used to be, but he's still a big presence out there if he's playing around the rim. So when there was Spencer Dinwiddie goes out to Dallas in that deal and Davis Bertans. So it's kind of, one team's problem for the other teams at that point. But there is a world where if Porzingis stays healthy, that might work out for them, and they might be more competitive than people think. I like Danny Avdia now that he's back out there. He had an awesome summer in Eurobasket too, among a number of guys. So I'm interested to see them on Sunday. I had respect for them coming into this year. They're playing probably candidate in the East, but they are one of those teams that could make a little bit more noise than you think early on. And then you got your teams that are on the downturn, like Philly, Minnesota early, I think, has been really disappointing. Who else is in that camp? Like, you got your Sacramento, who I thought was going to be better than they've looked so far. Like, who's that team you're looking at right now with like the eyebrow emoji sticking up in terms of like slow starts?
I think I think I named them. Or did I said Philly? Yeah, I said Philly. Philly
You're worried
seemed
about Philly? I had them as the 1 seed. Like, I flipped it at the last minute. I had Milwaukee. I was like, oh, they get some injuries. They're getting a little older. Middleton's out to start the year. Of course, they have the best defensive rating by miles, and they're rolling out of the gate. And Philly, Harden's putting up these monster numbers, but if you actually watch the game, I don't like what he's doing. Like, he's not connecting with Embiid. He's not playing defense. He's, dominating the ball, so you're not getting your Harrises and your Maxis involved. And I'm worried about Doc. I love Doc. I don't want to see him fired, but it might happen.
Yeah, they seem disjointed right now. Nothing. I'm not seeing anything that would be like, oh yeah, they're not contenders for whatever to win the East or at least to make the Eastern Conference Finals at that. But it looks disjointed, like you said. It's a lot of Harden, and even he's putting up monster numbers, but watching him, he's not looking like the Harden that we're accustomed to. Like, and I think it's kind of comfortable or safe to just say that the Harden that we're going to have is not going to be Houston Harden in terms of just blowing by guys, getting to the rim at will. Like, we're seeing a lot of him just being super physical, and just kind of like bullying his way into shots instead of blowing by guys. He's just like putting his chest or not chest, his arm, his shoulder into guys, and just creating like that. That's why we've kind of seen an uptick in his mid-range shots, just because he's not, able to fully get to the rim. But you said it well yourself, like he's not connecting with guys as much. It's a lot of just him. I guess it's a similarity between what he did in Houston, just a lot of him creating, but you have other creators there, and there's not a synergy in terms of how they're playing offensively. Like, it seems to be your turn, my turn. All right, we're like running different offenses, and then defensively, I know that it just came out the other day that Joel Embiid was dealing with plantar fasciitis during the summer, impacting
He
his.
didn't look right in Boston to me in that game. A lot of jump shots, early slow start against Noah Vonleh, and Horford was in foul trouble early, and he couldn't take advantage.
Yeah, he looks sluggish offensively. Then defensively, he just doesn't. He didn't look as engaged. And I know he would go through these spurts of just like, all right, I'm cruising the first couple quarters or first few quarters, and the fourth one I'm gonna turn the defense up. But even that we hadn't seen from him as much. So you wonder how much of it's just like these guys got to get healthy. Like, at least with Embiid, he just has to ramp up his conditioning. But even when that comes, like, they got to get back. Their defense has just been like, get back on defense. If you're not going to be rebounding the ball well offensively, you got to get back. And that just hasn't been the case either. So that's what I mean. It's more than just like the synergy. It also seems to be an effort ordeal too, especially with the transition defense.
Yeah, for sure. And they got to be better on that. And Matisse Thybulle doesn't play, which is weird anymore. And Embiid in the role is 119 per 100, which is good. 75th percentile. That's a great number. But we saw them producing like 1-3 at their best last year after Harden arrived via trade. I'm looking at Harden's number right now in terms of the efficiency in the pick and roll, 0.97. It's not good enough. They got to get going in that pick and roll. It was as good as any in the league last year. That's what gave me hope for them. I thought they could just run that all day long and get by and put up these monster numbers, but it hasn't been the case. The depth's not there, as this commenter says. I'm worried about them. I am. They're on my worry list. Sacramento's at the top because Sacramento. I thought this would be the year that changes, but not quite so far. I loved one of my favorite quotes this year. I saw Kings fans saying, Mike Brown had said, like, this team I saw on the court tonight, it is not a team I recognize from practice. And they're like, yeah, we know.
Well, I guess when I think about them, like, I did have hopes for them, but I guess I don't put them in that light just because
they weren't a contender, but I thought they'd squeeze in the playoffs, and they still might. The West is pretty weak. They're still trying to integrate some guys, but not what you're looking for out of the gate.
And at least to their defense, like they had like all teams they've played have been Portland, Clippers, and Golden State.
Yeah,
That goal,
tough start.
and the Golden State game was deceiving because it was a 5-point loss, but the starters really created that big separation early, and then they were kind of like, it seemed like, from what I can remember, I think it was like when the bench got in for Golden State, the younger guys got in for Golden State. That's when Sacramento starts to make their push. But it's also just been like a tough start in terms of schedule. Like you're talking about 3 teams who I guess 2 teams who before the season, preseason were contenders, and a Portland team who hasn't lost a game yet. And like you said earlier, was one of the darlings, the early season darlings. So for Sacramento, I'm just kind of like, all right, let's get a few more games, or if you don't pick up a win soon, like how much is the confidence going to get hit?
All right, he is Khobi Price with the Orlando Sentinel. Great to have you on Dome Theory for the first time, number 96 here. Go check out his story in the Sentinel on Bol Bol, the former Celtic, killing it down there in Orlando. Keep an eye on Paolo Banchero, everything that team's doing down there. They're one of my teams to watch this year in terms of growth. The wins aren't there yet, which maybe they don't need to be in a year where you want to be low in that draft. But I see lots of individual things that I'm excited about with them. And they are playing the Cavs tonight. So good night to tune in. Cavs coming to Boston on Friday. So you can get a head start on looking at them and what they're going to bring to the Garden on Friday night. And that's all I got to say. Celtics practice today. We'll have some reports on them over on the Garden Report. I'm actually going to jump on those now. Grant Williams suspended today for that brush up with the official in Chicago. You have the Kanye Jalen saga continuing. And ending, I guess. He cut ties with Kanye, and many people have at this point, so we'll dive into that as well. He didn't talk today, which is unfortunate, but he did put out a statement, so we'll talk about that. Always something in Boston, Khobi. We'll catch up with you later this season. I think they'll be here for a mini series in January, so we'll catch you then.
December 16th and 18th. I think they would. Orlando travels to Boston. They play the Friday. I think it's like a Friday and Sunday.
Awesome. Love those. We can do a podcast again then. Thanks, Khobi.
I appreciate you. Thanks for having me on.